and Law Reform Committee. I'd like to remind everyone to switch off and put to silent their mobile phones and other electronic devices. And we have received apologies from Ross McCall MSP, and Oliver Mundell MSP is here as our substitute. Welcome, Oliver. The first item of business is to decide whether to take item 5 in private. Is the committee content to take this item in private? Yes. Under agenda item number 2, we're considering instruments subject to the affirmative procedure. In relation to the draft care home services, visits to and by care home residents, Scotland Regulations 2026, the draft Care Leaver Payment Scotland Regulations 2026, the draft Social Security Uprating Miscellaneous Amendments Scotland Regulations 2026, the draft Legal Aid and Advice and Assistance Fees Miscellaneous Amendment Scotland Regulations 2026, the Real-Aid and draft National Bus Travel Concession Schemes Miscellaneous Amendment Scotland Order 2026, the draft Private Housing Rent Control Exempt Property Scotland Regulations 2026, the draft Scottish Aggregates Tax Miscellaneous Amendment Regulations 2026, the draft Rehabilitation of Offenders Act 1974 Exclusions and Exceptions, Domestic Homicide and Suicide Reviews Scotland Amendment Order 2026, the draft Marine Licensing Exempted Activities Scottish Inshore Region Amendment Order 2026, and the draft Local Government Finance Scotland Order 2026. Is the committee content that no reporting grounds are engaged? Yes. Thank you. And in relation to the draft Care Home Services Regulations, Regulation 8 imposes a statutory requirement on care home service providers to have regard to a code of practice in carrying out the duties imposed by the instrument. Given the importance of allowing time for affected service providers to prepare to comply with this new requirement, does the committee wish to welcome that the Scottish Government intends to publish the Code of Practice in advance of the requirement coming into force? Yep. Also, in relation to this instrument, does the committee wish to highlight its correspondence with the Scottish Government on this point to the committee for its information? Yep. In relation to the Care Leaver Payment Regulations, does the committee wish to welcome that the Scottish Government will address a typographical error in relation to 11.2 to change responsible authority to relevant authority, either by correction slip or at the next suitable legislative opportunity? In relation to the Social Security Regulations, does the committee wish to welcome that this instrument fulfils a commitment by the Scottish Government to correct an error in the Carers Assistance Miscellaneous and Consequential Amendments Revocation Transitional and Savings Provisions Scotland Regulations 2025? In relation to the Legal Aid and Advice and Assistance Regulations, does the committee wish to welcome that through this instrument the Scottish Government has, at the next suitable legislative opportunity, fulfilled a commitment made to the committee in relation to the draft Legal Aid and Advice and Assistance Miscellaneous Amendment Scotland Regulations 2026 to correct the erroneous references in the Civil Legal Aid Scotland Regulations 2002 and the minor drafting point that instrument introduced in the Advice and Assistance by Way of Representation Scotland Regulations 2003. Finally, in relation to the National Bus Travel Order, does the committee wish to note that the original draft of this instrument, which was laid on the 4th of December 2025, was withdrawn and the present version was relayed to enable a draft code to be provided to the lead committee to aid its scrutiny of the draft instrument? And this committee also wish to note this context when reporting on this instrument in its next quarterly report. Under agenda item number 3, we're considering instruments subject to the negative procedure. Issues have been raised on 2 of these instruments. The first instrument is SSI 2026-20, the National Health Service Functions of the Common Services Agency, Miscellaneous Amendment Scotland Order 2026. This instrument dissolves NHS Education for Scotland and transfers its functions, property, rights, liabilities and obligations to the Common Services Agency for the Scottish Health Service. It also makes consequential and transitional provision. In correspondence with the Scottish Government, published alongside the papers for this meeting, the committee asked about the consequential amendments and repeals that the instrument is making to primary legislation in Part 1 of the schedule to this instrument, and why the Scottish Government considers the enabling powers permit this. The Scottish Government advised that it is relying on Section 105(7) of the National Health Service, Scotland Act 1978, to make these consequential amendments and repeals. There is no express power to amend primary legislation in Section 105(7) of that Act. The Committee's report on subordinate legislation considered at today's meeting will set out a fuller consideration of this response. Does the Committee wish to draw the instrument to the attention of the Parliament on reporting ground G, on the basis that provisions in Part 1 of the schedule have been made by what appears to be an unusual or an unexpected use of the powers conferred by the parent statute, in the absence of the express power to amend primary legislation, and in the absence of a fuller explanation from the Scottish Government. The second instrument where issues have been raised is SSI 2026-30, the Children's Hearings Scotland Act 2011 Rules of Procedure in Children's Hearings, Amendment Rules 2026. In correspondence with the Scottish Government, published alongside the papers for this meeting, the Committee asked why the amending provisions are not in the usual order, as the instrument inserts a new provision after Rule 100, and then inserts a new provision after Rule 93. The Scottish Government advised that this was due to a late drafting change. Does the Committee wish to draw the instrument to the attention of the Parliament under the general reporting ground because the order in which the amending provisions appear in the instrument is not in line with standard drafting practice? Also under this agenda item in relation to SSIs 2026, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 39, 44 and 46. Is the Committee content that no reporting grounds are engaged? Under agenda item number 4, we're considering a proposed draft instrument subject to consultation. In relation to SG 2026-33, the proposed draft Mental Health Care and Treatment Scotland Act 2003 remedial order 2026, does the Committee wish to note that the proposed order appears capable of remedying the incompatibility with convention rights identified in X versus Mental Health Tribunal for Scotland, that the proposed order goes beyond addressing the specific incompatibility identified by the Court, which concerned recorded matters in the context of compulsion orders, by extending the recorded matters framework to other types of forensic orders, but that this is permitted by the scope of the power in Section 12 of the Convention Rights Compliance Scotland 2001 Act, that the full technical scrutiny of the instrument will be carried out by the Committee when the finalised draft order is laid under the affirmative procedure, and that the incompatibility was identified in October 2022, and that the proposed order is not expected to come into force until November 2026, and draw this to the attention of the lead committee. Thank you. And that now concludes the public part of the meeting, and I'll move the committee into private.
Thank you.